Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that might sting before it sets you free. If you always protect his ego, you'll lose your identity. But hurt it once, with truth, not cruelty, and watch how he either walks away or wakes up. Because real connection doesn't come from keeping the peace, it comes from shaking things up. So if you've ever been afraid to speak your mind, to set a boundary, or to say this isn't enough, stay right here. This is the part where you stop being pleasing and start being powerful. Confidence is often misunderstood in relationships. Many believe it's about being loud, opinionated, or dominating a conversation, but in reality, it's far more subtle and far more powerful. It's the calm assertion of your values, the quiet certainty that you are worthy of love and respect without begging for it. When someone can see that you're comfortable in your own skin, it naturally commands attention. This type of confidence isn't about performance, it's about presence. In romantic dynamics, particularly when emotions are high, people tend to mold themselves to what they think the other person wants. But giving in too often or agreeing too easily may win short-term approval, yet it sacrifices long-term respect. Relationships built on appeasement are often brittle because there's no real foundation of mutual value. If someone always knows you'll bend, they stop respecting the shape you once held. So many people lose themselves in pursuit of someone else's validation, but real attraction grows from authenticity, not submission. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you teach the other person to expect less of you. Not less in quantity, but less in quality. Less honesty, less individuality, less fire. The dynamic becomes lopsided, not because someone took too much, but because you gave away too much without requiring anything real in return. It's tempting to think that saying yes keeps things smooth, keeps the peace, or makes you more likable. But in the long run, it creates a version of you that's harder to love because it isn't real. The most magnetic people don't aim to be universally agreeable. They aim to be deeply themselves. That might ruffle some feathers, bruise a few egos, or trigger defensive reactions. But what it also does is filter out the ones who are only ever there for the illusion. And the ones who remain, they're drawn to you not despite your standards, but because of them. There's an old myth that says, to keep someone close, you need to flatter their ego. And while it's true that we all like to feel seen, affirmed, and desired, there's a big difference between validation and enablement. When someone knows that you'll never challenge them, they begin to feel unchecked. And what's unchecked soon turns into uninvested. Because even if someone never says it aloud, deep down they crave the feeling of earning your affection. They want to know that you're with them by choice, not obligation or insecurity. And if they never have to rise to the occasion, there's nothing special about your connection. It becomes just another easy win. Relationships that inspire growth come from friction, healthy friction. You can only create that by being a person who values herself enough to speak truth, even if it temporarily dents the pride of the one across from her. The idea that calling someone out or asserting your boundaries is going to drive them away is rooted in fear, not fact. The truth is, if someone walks away because you held your standard, that person was already on their way out. They just needed an excuse. People who are genuinely invested don't leave when you're real with them. In fact, they lean in. When someone's ego is gently shaken, when they're made to realize you won't tolerate half-hearted love, it often stirs something much deeper in them. It can be a wake-up call, not a goodbye. Because love that's worth keeping isn't threatened by truth, it's clarified by it. And truth, especially when delivered with grace and self-assurance, isn't cruel, it's empowering. It invites the other person to show up better, not because you begged them to, but because you inspired them to. You don't have to be cruel to make a point. Strength doesn't equal harshness. In fact, the most effective kind of strength in a relationship is wrapped in softness. Firm but kind, direct but respectful. When you communicate with clarity, when you let someone know you see yourself as worthy of more, it creates a ripple effect. They start to see you differently. You become someone they want to protect, honor, and rise to meet. That shift doesn't come from attacking or manipulating. It comes from self-possession. The key is knowing that you're not trying to win anyone's affection through silence or smiles that aren't real. You're showing up honestly and giving them the opportunity to either step forward or step away. Either is valuable, because both teach you who is truly meant to walk beside you and who is just attracted to the idea of someone who wouldn't challenge them. Many people believe that if you make someone feel bad, even momentarily, it will backfire. But discomfort isn't damage. Discomfort is growth. A moment of ego bruising, when someone realizes they can't walk all over you, can be transformative. It can remind them that you're not just there to please, you're there to be a partner. Equal footing is what creates intimacy, not one person towering while the other tiptoes around the truth. A healthy ego check can open the door to deeper communication, more honest interaction, and ultimately more love. Because it says, I care enough about this connection to be real with you, even if it's inconvenient. It shows you're not afraid to risk momentary awkwardness for long-term authenticity. That's where depth comes from, moments where masks fall and the real connection begins. You don't build emotional safety by never rocking the boat. You build it by knowing that no matter how stormy things get, both people are willing to show up fully. That only happens when you're honest from the start. When you let someone see that you're not a doormat, they realize you're a door into something more meaningful. You have ideas, opinions, preferences. You have history and standards. All of that is part of what makes you compelling. And if you soften all those edges to make someone more comfortable, you also make yourself less vivid. It's okay to be intense. It's okay to be challenging. Because the right people don't shrink away from your strength, they admire it. They rise to meet it. And sometimes, the first step toward that rise is a bruised ego and a deeper conversation. Boundaries are attractive, not because they punish, but because they clarify. They reveal what you stand for and what you won't tolerate. When you're not afraid to say, that doesn't work for me, you shift the energy. You stop being the one who needs to be chosen and become the one who gets to choose. That energy is powerful, and it doesn't come from pretending to be independent. It comes from truly knowing you're whole, with or without someone else's validation. And when you operate from that place, you don't fear losing someone by being honest. You know that if truth pushes them away, it was never truth that broke the connection. It was the illusion finally dissolving. And in that space, the real relationship, if it exists, begins to take form. What's fascinating is that the more you operate from confidence, the less reactive you become. You stop trying to calculate every word, worried about how they'll perceive you. Instead, you speak from clarity, knowing that it's not your job to manage someone's feelings at the expense of your truth. That shift in energy often surprises people, especially those used to being tiptoed around, but it's also what earns their respect, not because you're playing a game, but because you're showing up fully. And when someone sees that, they can't push you over with charm. They realize you're not there to be collected, you're there to connect. And that subtle difference changes everything. You go from optional to essential, from background noise to someone worth listening to. At the heart of all of this is a simple but profound truth. The most irresistible thing you can be is real. Not polished to perfection, not agreeable at all costs, real. When you value yourself, when you're willing to speak up, even if it shakes someone's pride, you send a powerful message. You're not afraid of discomfort. You're not here to shrink. You're not looking to earn love through silence. You're offering love through honesty. And that kind of woman, she isn't just remembered, she's respected. Because she didn't just capture attention, she demanded presence. And the ones who recognize that won't just stick around, they'll rise. And in that rise, the relationship becomes something more than ego. It becomes equal. And that is the kind of love that lasts.
Healing does not require an audience. It is not something you owe to anyone else, nor is it something you have to explain. The moment you stop seeking closure from someone who never truly cared, you begin to reclaim your strength. You realize that not everyone is meant to understand your pain or witness your recovery. Healing is a private revolution, a sacred journey back to your center, your truth. You don't need validation for how you choose to rise. You just need the courage to begin. When someone breaks your spirit and then expects to be part of your healing, that's when you draw the line. You cannot find peace in the same place that broke you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away in silence and start over with yourself. Solitude often feels heavy in the beginning, but that weight is the weight of growth. The mesh is your weight of growth. In the quiet, when there are no distractions, no lies to comfort you, no illusions left to believe in, that is where true healing begins. You come face to face with everything you ignored, everything you tolerated, everything you accepted that was beneath your worth. You confront the truth without filters. It may sting, it may shatter your illusions, but it sets you free. Because what you discover in solitude is your resilience, your power to stand up again without needing someone else to hold your hand. You begin to understand that silence isn't loneliness, it's sacred space for transformation. When you stop talking, explaining, and reaching out to the person who hurt you, you shift the focus inward. Instead of giving them space in your mind, you give that space back to yourself. You begin to ask deeper questions. Not why did they leave, or what did I do wrong, but what do I truly deserve, and what boundaries must I never break again? Healing is not found in chasing answers, but in making new decisions for yourself. You stop reliving the same story and start writing a new one. In that silence, you find a voice that isn't trying to be heard. It's just trying to be honest. Halation. You find out who you are. And that honesty leads you back to self-respect. You don't need to announce your healing to the world or prove that you're doing better. Growth is not a performance. It's a quiet rebuilding. A choice to wake up every day and not give in to the pain. To smile not because you've forgotten, but because you've decided to forgive yourself for staying too long. There is a power in choosing not to seek revenge, not to explain, and not to beg for understanding. Let them wonder, let them guess. You owe no one your journey. What matters is that you're showing up for yourself now, stronger, wiser, and no longer willing to settle for broken promises. Healing also means forgiving yourself for the things you allowed, for the red flags you ignored, the excuses you made, and the times you gave love to someone who didn't deserve it. You stop blaming yourself for someone else's inability to love you the way you deserve. Ecclésiation, Lavoisier par deux / Putti. Le Verdi, for myself, for your brother, for your cousin, for your friends, for your people. You stop blaming yourself for someone else, for the way you deserve. You stopped. You stopped. I know you repeatedly. And instead of replaying their actions in your mind, you start to rewrite your role in your own story. This time, you make yourself the priority. This time, you speak kindly to the person in the mirror. Because healing is not just about letting go of someone else. It's about embracing the parts of you that you abandoned in the process. You begin to understand that your value was never defined by their presence or their failure to love you fully is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own limitations. You were enough all along. The problem was never your depth, it was that they couldn't swim. And now that they're gone, you're left with a clean slate, a space to build a life that reflects your strength. You no longer seek to fit into someone else's world. You create your own. A world where your peace isn't compromised, your voice isn't silenced, and your love isn't questioned. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but what you do with that time determines everything. You can choose to waste it dwelling on what was lost, or you can use it to rediscover what you still have. You, your dreams, your heart, your resilience. Healing happens when you stop asking why they did it and start focusing on what you'll never accept again. It's not about pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing not to let it define you. You become a new version of yourself, not harder, but wiser, not colder, but more selective. And that version of you is built on boundaries, not bitterness. There's a certain grace in healing quietly. While the world may expect you to scream, to prove that you've moved on, you simply evolve in silence. You don't need to announce your glow up. Real power is in the fact that you no longer crave their attention. You don't need them to see your worth anymore. You see it yourself. And when that happens, you stop trying to be remembered. You stop trying to haunt them with your success. You just live freely and unapologetically. That's the most powerful revenge. Indifference, peace, and joy. They can't touch. The silence you embrace in your healing becomes a sanctuary, a space where you are no longer performing, defending, or surviving. You are just being whole, being enough, being aware of your value without needing someone else to confirm it. You realize that the power you were searching for in someone else was always within you. And in that realization, you are reborn, not as someone who was broken, but as someone who rose, quietly, gracefully, fully. The person you are becoming doesn't need to prove a thing. Their presence alone will speak volumes. In the end, healing is about coming home to yourself. After giving so much of your energy to someone who never reciprocated, you finally choose you. You close the door not with anger, but with peace. You no longer need answers, apologies, or recognition. You've given those things to yourself. You've learned that silence isn't empty, it's full of clarity, full of truth, full of self-love. And as you walk forward, without fanfare, without noise, you carry with you something far more valuable than closure. You carry freedom. And in that freedom, you find your true power.
The ability to hold someone accountable is one of the most underrated qualities in a relationship, not because it's confrontational, but because it's rooted in care. When you care about someone, you want the best version of them to come forward, not just for you, but for them. Being silent when something bothers you may feel easier in the moment, but over time, it chips away at the authenticity of your connection. Speaking your truth, even if it risks temporary discomfort, is a sign of strength. It shows that you're not afraid to stand up for what matters. And more importantly, it shows that you believe the other person is capable of hearing it and growing from it. That belief alone can be transformative. People rise when they feel someone expects more of them, not out of judgment, but out of trust. Accountability, when done with love, inspires progress, not punishment. When you hold a mirror up to someone, you don't do it to shame them. You do it to reflect what they might not yet see. It's a gesture of belief, not condemnation. You're saying, I see who you are, And I know you can be more aligned, more aware, more intentional. That kind of presence is rare in relationships because so many are afraid to say the thing that needs to be said. But love without honesty isn't love. It's performance, and performances eventually wear thin. The truth may sting for a moment, but it leaves behind clarity. It invites depth. It opens doors to conversations that matter, conversations that shift patterns, deepen trust, and build a real emotional foundation. Silence may protect someone's ego, but truth protects the relationship's potential. There is a misconception that protecting someone's feelings means avoiding the hard truths, but real respect means knowing when someone can handle more and holding them to that. When you let someone know kindly and clearly that something they did was hurtful, dismissive, or below what you're willing to accept, it places value on the connection. You're not sweeping things under the rug, you're keeping the space clean between you. That clarity is uncomfortable only for those who aren't used to being challenged. But for someone who is emotionally mature or ready to grow, it can be a wake-up call, not in the form of accusation, but in the form of invitation. You're inviting them to participate in a relationship that has depth, boundaries, and mutual respect. And the people who value connection more than control will accept that invitation. There is strength in calling someone forward. Not because you're trying to change them, but because you're showing that you're unwilling to shrink yourself to make the dynamic easier. When you do this, you become someone who doesn't just go along to get along. You're someone who values integrity in how people show up, not just for you, but for themselves. And that standard elevates the relationship. It adds weight to your presence. You're not there to fill space, you're there to co-create something meaningful. When a person realizes that your love doesn't come at the cost of your voice, it shifts the entire dynamic. It moves from passivity to purpose, from guessing to grounding. It builds a relationship where both people feel seen, heard, and responsible for what they bring to the table. People often think that being direct is dangerous, that if you say the wrong thing or point out a flaw, you'll scare someone off. But what actually pushes people away isn't honesty, it's resentment. All the unspoken disappointments, all the quiet compromises that erode trust and passion over time are what ultimately create distance. Speaking up is a form of emotional hygiene. It clears the air before toxicity settles in. It prevents tiny issues from becoming insurmountable divides. When you let someone know how their behavior made you feel, you're giving them a chance to show up differently. You're offering them the opportunity to take accountability, to grow, and to reconnect. And someone who genuinely values you won't walk away from that. They'll lean into it. It's not your job to fix anyone, but it is your right to express how their actions affect you. That boundary is essential. When you hold someone accountable, you're not placing blame, you're drawing a line. You're saying, this is what respect looks like to me. If you want to be in my life, it needs to exist between us. That kind of standard is powerful. It separates those who are serious about growth from those who are only interested in convenience. It ensures that your relationships are not just based on chemistry or charm, but on shared values and mutual effort. Because without accountability, there's no sustainability. Passion fades without respect, and respect is born in the moments when truth is spoken, even when it's difficult. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your standards. Accountability isn't loud, it's consistent. It's in the calm, firm way you say, that doesn't work for me. It's in the silence you choose when actions don't align with words. It's in the grace with which you walk away from what doesn't honor your value. That quiet strength is what leaves a lasting impression. Not because it bruises the ego, but because it awakens it. It forces someone to ask themselves, why did that moment feel different? Why do I still think about what they said? It plants a seed of awareness, and that seed, given time and reflection, can grow into real transformation. especially when it's watered by someone who didn't demand change, but inspired it through clarity and conviction. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a relationship is stop making excuses for someone else's behavior. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. When you take a step back and say, I won't carry the emotional weight for both of us, you challenge the other person to rise, to either meet you or move on. That moment is often the turning point, because people sense when they're no longer able to hide behind your empathy. And while that may sting their pride, it also invites their growth. The right person won't be scared off by your strength. They'll be awakened by it. They'll understand that accountability isn't about control. It's about collaboration. Two people, side by side, committed to doing the emotional work to sustain love that lasts. Emotional intimacy deepens through truth, not protection. You don't build something real by avoiding every moment of tension. You build it by navigating those moments with honesty, grace, and maturity. When you speak up, you teach someone how to love you better. You give them the information they need to meet your needs. That's not criticism, it's care. And care, expressed through honesty, is a form of love that doesn't fade. It builds trust. Because the more real you are, the more reliable your love becomes. And when both people show up that way, accountability isn't scary. It becomes sacred. A practice of growth, safety, and mutual respect that elevates the relationship from ordinary to extraordinary. You can be kind and still be clear. You can be loving and still have limits. The beauty of accountability is that it doesn't ask you to choose between compassion and courage. It requires both. You're not hurting someone by showing them where the line is. You're helping them see how to love you more fully, and in the process, you're showing them how to love themselves better too. Because anyone who learns to rise in the presence of someone who won't settle is someone who walks away stronger, whether they stay or not. And if they do stay, it's not because you lowered your standards. It's because you raised the relationship to meet them. That's not ego, that's evolution. And evolution is where real love begins. It's easy to believe that keeping someone interested means giving more affection, more attention, more approval. But often, the thing that deepens desire is not what you give, but what you withhold. Your automatic agreement, your constant availability, your need to be liked. When you show someone that you don't need their validation to feel secure, you shift the dynamic completely. Suddenly, your energy carries weight, your time feels deliberate, and your presence no longer feels like something they're entitled to, it becomes something they value. Because you haven't made yourself small to fit into their life, you've made space for yourself, and in doing so, you've invited them to meet you there with effort. This creates magnetism, not rooted in performance, but in power. Quiet, calm, undeniable power. When you stop trying to impress and start focusing on expressing, everything changes. You no longer act out of fear that someone will leave if you speak your truth or set a boundary. Instead, you act out of self-respect, knowing that losing someone who doesn't value you fully isn't a loss at all. It's a release. This doesn't make you harsh, it makes you grounded. You don't need to defend your standards, just maintain them. When someone senses that you aren't chasing them or constantly adjusting yourself to please them, they begin to wonder why. That curiosity creates a new level of engagement. They have to earn access to you, not because you're playing games, but because you're finally treating yourself as worthy of being earned. That's the kind of attraction that doesn't fade. It grows stronger over time. True power in a relationship comes from knowing that you have nothing to prove. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. Your value is non-negotiable. When you operate from that belief, you become naturally less reactive. You stop personalizing someone's disinterest or inconsistency. You stop clinging to their potential. Instead, you observe how they show up. You listen more than you chase. You lean into clarity instead of fantasy. That shift in behavior signals something vital. You're not here to be chosen by default. You're here to choose. And in doing so, You invite someone to show up, not out of comfort, but out of conviction. That's when you go from being an option to becoming a priority, because your self-respect refuses to settle for anything less. Many people spend so much time trying to avoid being too much, too honest, too intense, too challenging, that they end up being too little, not because they are, but because they hide so much of themselves. They mute their voice, dampen their light, and soften their edges to make the other person feel more in control. But in doing so, they lose the very qualities that made them captivating in the first place. When you allow yourself to be fully seen, even if it means risking rejection, you create a different kind of connection. You give someone the chance to rise to the level of honesty you're offering. And if they can't or won't, you're better off knowing that sooner rather than later. Hiding parts of yourself for acceptance isn't love, it's fear dressed up as connection. You don't need to create tension to be attractive, but you do need to hold your space. That means allowing there to be moments when you don't agree, when you don't text first, when you don't apologize for needing more, when you stop managing someone's emotional comfort and start honoring your own emotional truth. That resistance isn't conflict, it's clarity. It lets someone know that love isn't guaranteed just because there's interest. There has to be effort, consistency, and mutual respect. When someone senses that they can't rely on charm alone to keep you, they begin to realize that your heart is something to be earned, not assumed. And that realization is what separates the ones who are passing through from the ones who are truly ready to stay. There is something deeply attractive about restraint. Not emotional coldness, but the kind of strength that doesn't rush to fill silence or fix discomfort. When you're okay with not being instantly liked, when you're patient enough to let someone show you who they really are, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You don't need to dominate the conversation or impress with perfection. Your calm presence, your steady energy, and your ability to remain centered, regardless of how someone reacts, speaks volumes. That kind of confidence is rare, and rare things capture attention. Not because they shout, but because they whisper. Something more powerful, I am enough. Whether you stay or go, that quiet message echoes longer than any performance ever could. It's tempting to believe that love is about winning someone over, that if you just say the right thing, act the right way, make the right impression, they'll stay. But real connection doesn't need to be earned through effort. It needs to be revealed through authenticity. You can't control whether someone values what they see in you, but you can control whether what they're seeing is the truth. The more you show your full self, the messy, the real, the brave, the more you attract someone who connects with you, not a filtered version of you. That authenticity becomes a filter. The ones who aren't ready will walk away, but the one who stays, they'll stay for the right reasons. Not because you made yourself perfect, but because you made yourself honest. Not every moment in a relationship has to be warm and affirming. Some of the most powerful shifts happen in moments of tension, when you pause instead of pursue, when you question instead of accommodate. Those moments aren't about creating conflict, they're about creating clarity. You learn more about someone in how they respond to your boundaries than in how they respond to your compliments. If they pull away when you stop trying to please, that tells you everything. If they lean in when you challenge them gently, that's the foundation for something deeper. You don't have to hurt someone's ego to make a point, but you do have to stop shrinking to protect it. Growth happens where comfort ends, and connection happens when both people are willing to stretch. Your value isn't something that needs to be declared, it's something that's felt. People can sense when you know who you are. They can feel the difference between someone who's trying to be liked and someone who already likes themselves. That energy speaks louder than words. It shifts the room, the relationship, and the dynamic. You stop waiting for someone to pick you, and you start choosing how you want to be loved. That energy makes someone pay attention. It makes them think, adjust, and engage differently. Because they realize they're dealing with someone who doesn't settle, someone who knows what alignment feels like. And that self-assured energy is magnetic, not because it demands attention, but because it commands respect. At the core of all of this is the belief that you don't need to lose yourself to find love. You don't need to silence your truth, lower your standards, or soften your light to keep someone around. If being real costs you a relationship, it was never a relationship, it was a transaction. But when you show up fully, unapologetically, and with quiet strength, you give someone the opportunity to meet you, not just date you. And when they meet you there, not only does attraction deepen, but respect does too. Respect is the soil where passion and partnership grow. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is honest. And that honesty isn't a risk. It's the foundation. The ones who are ready will feel it. The ones who aren't will fall away. Either way, you remain whole. And that is the most attractive place you can stand.